Chapter 2. I told you there was rain on the wind. More than that, Joseph grunted. It was a downpour. Might get a chance to see one of them twisters I've heard so much about. You ever see a cow fly, Nieto? No, he answered, always so serious. Me neither. Joseph clapped his free hand over his hat as a sudden gust tried to steal it. With the other, he kept a tight grip on Steele's slick reins. The Mustang arched his neck and plowed on through the darkness. Lightning flashed on the horizon, brief and blinding. Joseph spied the outlines of buildings ahead before they disappeared. There, that'll be Salina. A crash of thunder made Steele spring sideways. Easy, Joseph muttered, talking to himself as much as the horse. He pulled his dripping hat lower over his brow. We robbed the bank here 10 years back. It got real ugly. Real fast. Why come back? Nieto asked. The rain had flattened his long black hair against the grizzly pelt he wore over his shirt. Something about a moneylender wanting muscle. If a fella needs roughing up, Sal always sends me or Marcus. We're good at scaring folks. And not much else, Joseph thought gloomily. You think you're gonna need another pair of fists? You ain't here to fight. You're here to drink. Oh, Nieto said, sounding puzzled. Why me? You've been doing your part for the gang, pulling your weight, more than some of the fellas who've been running with us a lot longer, Joseph explained, meeting the Indian's gaze. We ain't talked much, you and me, but I wanted you to know the work you've been putting in ain't gone unnoticed. Still, he seemed unsure. I appreciate that, Joseph, but I don't know if this is a good idea. Nobody saw my face. Getting recognized shouldn't be a problem. I don't mean that. I mean, me. Realizing that he was talking about being an Indian, Joseph waved away Nieto's worry. They ain't gonna give us no trouble. Salina has its share of misfits and lawbreakers. That was 10 years ago, Nieto reminded him. Things might have changed. Guess we'll find out. In the 3 months since he'd joined the gang, Nieto had gone to great lengths to prove himself useful. He didn't talk much, kept mostly to himself, but he did chores around the camp the others thought themselves too good for. That ain't why you brought him along. Joseph stared into the blackness ahead, each step bringing him closer to the last place he wanted to be. He tried to get out of it. Marcus had volunteered to go instead, but Sal had insisted. Is that why he sent me? Because I didn't want to? The wind howled, the rain blowing sideways across the prairie. Without the moon, Joseph couldn't see more than a few steps in front of him. When they crossed the bridge into town, he heard the river rushing beneath him. His muscles tensed, soaked to the bone and chilled with dread. He peered up at the lamps burning in the windows. The bad weather had driven everyone indoors, a stroke of good luck that made the misery worth it. Joseph read the sign as he rounded the corner. Santa Fe Ave. His stomach turned, his heart racing out of control. Rain stung his eyes. Rain or sweat. Gunshots pop on the sidewalks in the street. Women scream as they run for their lives. Windows shatter. Bodies fall in clouds of dust and smoke. A dead girl lies in a blood-stained dress. Joseph stopped Steele in front of the bank, trying to catch his breath, to shut out the noise, but closing his eyes made it worse. What is it? Nieto asked. Nothing, Joseph mumbled. He tapped the stallion's sides with his spurs and walked on. After stabling their horses at the nearest livery, they trudged to the saloon across from the bank and stepped onto the covered sidewalk. We must be a sorry sight, Nieto muttered, adjusting the soggy pelt on his shoulders. Joseph shrugged. No worse than the rest of them. His coat whipped around his legs as he pushed through the batwing doors. The lively melody of a piano met his ears, the air thick with the smell of burning tobacco. A big chandelier hung over gamblers hunched behind cards and stacked chips. Another group of men played billiards in a back room. Several curious stares tightened the knot in Joseph's gut. He strode toward the bar, where a portly man with a gray mustache wiped a glass with a rag. The man glanced up at him, then down at his work. His hand paused, and he glanced up again. Joseph pulled his pair of Schofield revolvers from the holsters on his hips and put them on the counter. 2 whiskeys. The man cleared his throat and set down the glass. I'm sorry, sir, we don't serve spirits. It's the law here in Kansas, and this is a law-abiding establishment. Joseph blinked and looked at Nieto, who shrugged. The bartender's earnest face didn't show even the slightest hint of cracking a smile. "You're serious, ain't you?" "Yes, sir. Been the law here 2 years now. The law also says his kind ain't allowed in here," he added with a nod at Nieto. Joseph's eyes narrowed, a fuse lighting inside him. He flattened his palms against the bar and cocked his head. "What kind is that?" The man swallowed. "I'd be more than happy to fix you our famous prairie chicken or some stew, sir, but your friend'll have to wait outside." Joseph glared at him. If he weren't in a room full of witnesses. "In and out," Sal had said. "Quick and quiet." Sweat beaded on the bartender's brow. Nieto put a firm hand on his arm. "Let's go, Joseph. We don't want to start any trouble." "Hey!" someone barked behind them. "Who let that redskin off the reservation?" Joseph picked up his revolvers and turned around as a burly man rose from his chair at one of the poker tables. He had a balding head, a bushy beard, and a mean look in his eyes, his belly spilling over his waistband. "That's mighty impolite of you, mister. Why don't you apologize to my friend here before I lose my temper?" Joseph warned. "What did you say?" the stranger exclaimed. "Deaf and ugly? Your mama must be real proud of you." "Take it outside, Frank," the bartender interrupted. "I'll have no fighting in here tonight." Frank marched toward Joseph with clenched fists. "You asking for a whipping, boy?" And Nieto stepped between them. Frank stopped and frowned down his crooked nose. "Get out of my way, Red." He was the biggest man in the room, and he seemed to think that made him invincible. Bet he ain't ever lost a fight, Joseph thought. He shoved his guns back into his holsters. About time he did. And Nieto didn't budge, and Frank's face turned red with rage. He took a swing at him, but Nieto was too quick. He ducked and thrust his fist into Frank's stomach. Frank grunted, but didn't go down. He punched Nieto and sent him reeling. The piano stopped. Joseph's burning fuse reached its end, and he exploded into action. As Frank lunged at Nieto, Joseph caught him and shoved him back. Joseph's teeth clacked together as Frank retaliated. He staggered, his hand flying to his jaw. Frank grabbed him by his coat and flung him onto the floor. Pain jarred Joseph's ribs. He scrambled to his feet and spun around. As Nieto charged at Frank, 2 men jumped up from Frank's table and rushed to stop him. "Take it outside!" the bartender hollered. Joseph dodged a clumsy punch from Frank and drove his knuckles into Frank's cheekbone. The impact rippled up his arm. Growling, Frank grappled with him again. As they struggled, Joseph saw Nieto slam a man face first into a bowl of stew. Joseph rammed his knee into Frank's gut. A downward swing knocked one hand loose, and Frank's skull smacked against his. White light burst before Joseph's eyes. His arms went limp, and Frank threw him backward through the saloon doors. He hit the sidewalk and rolled off, splashing into something wet and sticky. Mud. Fingers curling into the cool earth, Joseph pushed himself onto his hands and knees. A deep breath of stormy air revived him. Pain stabbed his sides as he stood. Rain pattered on his shoulders and flattened his hair against his forehead. His hat lay in a nearby puddle. Tasting a coppery tang on his tongue, Joseph ran the back of his hand under his throbbing nose and found it smeared with blood. Not again, he thought, with a sigh. "You had enough, boy," Frank taunted from the sidewalk. Joseph didn't fight much anymore, not with his fists, but when he did, he always won. He glared up at Frank and squared his shoulders. "I'm just getting started." Lightning flashed as Frank jumped down from the sidewalk. Joseph sidestepped the first reckless swing that came his way, the fire in his blood clearing his head. He landed a pair of quick strikes, but Frank blocked the third and knocked him to the ground. The small crowd that had gathered on the sidewalk cheered. Sprawled on his stomach, Joseph spat blood from his mouth and pushed himself up again. A knee dug into his back as a hand shoved his face into the mud. He couldn't breathe. Arms thrashing. He reached for something. Anything. His thumb found an eyeball and gouged. Frank howled. Gasping for air, Joseph threw him off, got up on his knees, and hit him again. Frank fell backward with a splash. Joseph crawled on top of him, ready to finish the fight. Blood pounded in his ears as he pulled back his right fist. He grit his teeth and let it fly. Crack! Broke the man's nose. Again, make him hurt. Make him pay. And he did. Again and again and again, bloodying his knuckles and making a mess of Frank's face. I said enough! Someone yanked Joseph's arm, trying to drag him off. Thunder boomed as he rounded on whoever had the nerve to interfere. He found himself glaring into Iñeto's dark eyes. Joseph's chest heaved, blood and rain running down his face. Enough, Iñeto repeated. Joseph shrugged him off and trudged past him, snatching his hat from the puddle as he went. A wave of exhaustion rolled over him as he stumbled to the water trough in front of the saloon. He set his hat on the hitching rail, bent over, and splashed cold water onto his face, washing away the mud and blood. He shouldn't have drawn attention to himself. Sal would be furious if he found out. Joseph swore under his breath and looked up at the men on the sidewalk. "You best ride on to the next town," one of them said. "Cowboys like you aren't welcome here no more." Joseph scowled. "I ain't no cowboy." He shoved his hat onto his head and walked away. "That didn't go as planned," Iñeto muttered as they returned to the livery. Joseph pinched the bridge of his nose and winced. He didn't think it was broken, but he couldn't be sure. He got what was coming to him. So did his friends. Iñeto rubbed his knuckles and sighed. "Sal won't be happy when he hears about this." "I won't tell him if you don't." Iñeto glanced at him in surprise. "You think that's a good idea?" "No, but facing Sal's wrath would be worse. Sal's got enough on his mind. You don't need to be bothered with this." Even as he said it, Joseph dreaded the inevitable. He'd never been able to hide anything from Sal. Not for long. None of them could. "We going back to camp?" Iñeto asked as they led their horses out of the stable. "You are, if you want, but I got a meeting to keep." Iñeto stopped and shook his head. "Sorry. With all that happened, I forgot." He mounted his pinto mare. Joseph moved to Steele's side, grasped the saddle horn, and hesitated. Guilt weighed on him. Battling with his ironclad pride, he let go of the horn and turned to look up at Iñeto. "I'm sorry," he blurted, "about what happened back there." Iñeto shrugged, his solemn expression shifting into a wry smile. "It was more fun than drinking." Relieved, Joseph smiled back. His jaw twinged, and he grimaced, reaching up to massage it. Iñeto trotted away, and Joseph hauled himself into the saddle. As he rode farther north down Santa Fe Avenue, he cringed with every step the stallion took. The pain doubled him over, and he cursed that raving fool Frank, the bartender, everyone in that blasted saloon. The directions Sal had given him brought Joseph to a small office tucked between a shoemaker and a harness seller. Painted above the office door in big black letters was the single word, loans. He hitched Steele out front, and seeing a close sign on the door, ventured a knock. "Come in," a thin voice called. The door creaked as Joseph stepped into the lamp-lit room, and he shut it behind him. An older man wearing a black vest and a clean white shirt sat at a desk neatly stacked with papers, holding a pencil in his bony hand. "Good evening. How may I help you, sir?" he asked with an expectant gleam in his sunken eyes. "Actually, I'm here to help you," Joseph answered. "You Howard Roach?" "I am. Please, come closer, though I must ask that you remain standing given your current condition." Joseph eyed him warily as he approached the desk, spurs clinking and boots muddying an expensive-looking rug. Maybe he'd care if it were someone else's rug, someone who didn't latch onto struggling people like a leech and bleed them dry. He hated these jobs, hated kicking folks already down on their luck. "You were sent by Mr. Valentin, yes?" Joseph nodded and rested his hands on his gun belt. "That's right." Adjusting the glasses perched on his beak-like nose, Roach put down the pencil. "There's a fella who lives on a homestead 10 miles east of Salina. He borrowed a substantial sum many years ago after an unexpected misfortune and has paid back bits of it here and there. But life on the prairie is difficult. Setbacks have occurred, and he's missed payments. As a result, the interest has increased exponentially." "What do you want me to do?" Joseph said, wishing he'd get to the point already. Roach leaned forward and steepled his fingers. "Threaten him, beat him if you have to. I've been far more patient with him than he deserves." "What's his name?" Joseph asked. "Jesse Hance."